All right. First up on the agenda is approval of the minutes from the January 26, 2017 MAPS Citizen Advisory Board meeting. You've all had the meeting minutes in your package. Is there any comments, changes, or corrections? Second. Okay, we have a motion to move and a second to all in favor? Aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay, motion passes. Minutes are approved. Next up is revised MAPS 3 expenditure report ending January 31st. David?
You have in your packet the MAPS 3 revenue and expenditure report for the period ending January 31st, 2017. I'll briefly go over it. On the revenue side for the month, there was $9,211,538. For the fiscal year, $63,506,441, and total program revenue of $702,298,404. On the expenditure side for the month, $3,939,342. For the fiscal year of $40,642,319, and total program expenditures of $246,839,618. You also have your budget and obligations report that shows where we are on each of the projects, and I'll be glad to answer any questions you have of this.
Mike, have you had a chance to take a look at it?
I don't have any questions.
Okay.
I move we accept the report.
Okay, we've had a motion to accept and a second. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, nay. Okay, the motion passes. Okay, next up is item number 4. As I understand, it's a revised recommended resolution approving the preliminary report for the MAPS 3 Convention Center. The revision sheet has been passed out to you. And David, do you have a...
What we have today is the Populous team is here to give us a presentation on the preliminary report for the Convention Center. Now, Adam Pollich is going to lead that team today, so I'd like to invite him up to take you through this report.
Thanks, David. It's coming. So it's good to see all of you. I've seen some of you this week already. So we had a good meeting on Tuesday with our subcommittee. It was a long-winded meeting just because of the length of the preliminary report. I believe the document in total was over 1,000 pages of information that we have been working closely with all of you and our subcommittee and all other people around the city for the past year. And so, as I say almost every time, it's an exciting time for us for the project. We're extremely confident with where we're at, design-wise and budget-wise. So, a lot of this information that we have in front of us is stuff that we have seen quite a few times over the past few months. So I'll be brief with some things, and I'll really emphasize some of the important parts that we need to take away from preliminary report. Again, so our design principles, we talk about these every time, and they become more and more real every time that we meet with all of the development that's happening around the site. I know that there's a lot of demolition happening now, and when we think about the potential hotel and the park and the streetcar and all of the other things that are happening, these design principles are even more important to us today, and we still feel like we're addressing these through the design. And there's a lot of stuff that happens behind the scenes when we work on these projects, and it's not just us in our subcommittee or us in the Citizens Advisory Board. We come to town maybe almost weekly or bi-weekly to meet with all of these parties that you see here on this list. So this packet that you have in front of you is a heavily coordinated document between multiple entities of the city, the potential building operator. As far as OKCPD and the fire department, we have preliminary buy-off from them on all the aspects of our project. So, preliminary report, we're still holding the full program. This was a promise that we made way back in January of last year when we started working on this. So, 200,000 square feet exhibit hall, the 45,000 square feet meeting room, and the 30,000 square foot ballroom. The main design driver of this was how do you integrate a new facility like this in a completely new part of the city. And I think we're all aware of the challenges and also the excitement and all the opportunities that it brings to design a facility that is going to connect with all of these new, new opportunities and amenities that we have coming for this new event district. And these slides, to me, are quite exciting because it really starts to capture the past year of work. So you can see to the far left, we have some simple blocking and massing of where we were over a year ago, and we consolidated that to a few options with our subcommittee. Started the initial design, and now we are here today with preliminary report with the final, final design to move forward towards final plans. The same thing, these design drivers are still very important, and we're still conscious of them as we keep on moving through design. The pedestrian scale, how the building connects to the park in the north and the south and the center, and its relationship to the hotel, the views to downtown, how we can use the building to protect it from the elements, and then obviously a sense of scale and how we can design the building to account for the future expansion here in the future. Circulation around the building, very simple. We have back of house, and our loading dock is to the east, directly accessed off Broadway, and our front of house pre-function is located to the west, of course along Robinson, adjacent to the park. The building is divided on 3 or 3.5 levels is what we're calling it. We have our lowest level is our exhibit hall level, the middle level is the meeting room mezzanine, and the upper level is our ballroom and the remainder of our meeting room program. We specifically designed all of the program space to account for multiple levels of flexibility, and this is a conversation that we've been having with our subcommittee since the very beginning of the design process on how we can create spaces that make the building sellable, that make the building flexible, and I guess you could say future-proof the building to account for the changing meetings and plannings industry. And so you see a lot of flexibility built into these rooms with operable partitions, storage, furniture solutions. And so, again, these are conversations that we've been having along the way with our subcommittee through this entire process. For example, the exhibit hall is 200,000 square feet, but it has the potential to be divided into 4 50,000 square foot smaller exhibit halls, each with their own service entries, each with their own main entries, and all of their own support spaces to support each of those configurations. The circulation of the building, the main vertical circulation, there's 2 atriums. There's an atrium in the north that is closer to the park and the hotel. To the south, we have an atrium that is addressing not only the park, but any kind of parking that will be located to the southern end of our building. And all of the main circulation in the facility from each level will happen in these 2 atriums. These are also where we will have dynamic views out to the park and along Robinson. The building is also designed with a series of informal meeting spaces. These are more casual spaces spread out throughout the convention center, allowed for casual interaction. Each of these meeting spaces will have data and power, and the entire building will be equipped with Wi-Fi. Again, I think we've all been to conventions, and we don't have those places to sit and relax, and this is our best foot forward to provide those more casual interactions in these spaces. Hospitality and food service, this is something that we've been working very closely with the building operator, SMG, on how we can address food service. So the food service for the building will all come from the building operator. There won't be any private food incorporated in the building. Everything will be serviced from the main kitchen that is on the 3rd level of the building, and we will be addressing food service with portable solutions throughout the building. So this allows the building operator to have a level of flexibility in their offerings and how the facility can perform for different events. Walk through the plan since we basically saw those in 3D. And now we go to the design story, and the design story has stayed the same. Core to shore, earth to sky, how does the building tie in to the core and the shore program, and how the building touches the ground and how it reaches into the sky. And so we still use these Oklahoma City precedent images that we've now been looking at for years as we've started to develop this project. And we just think that they're still very important to the design story and the story that we're trying to tell with the convention center. And of course, the way that we've managed the form of the building, the solids and the voids, and then how we modulate light, not only for user experience, but how we could make people comfortable inside the building as well. So, when we think about our program, and we have the first diagram on the top there, that's a program that we came up with, with our subcommittee, and how that started to turn into an architectural language. So this story, form follows function. I mean, it's one of the very first things that they teach you in architecture school on how to design a successful building, and I think we've achieved that here, where you can really tell from the exterior of the building what the program is doing, and the different areas where people are meeting inside the facility. So I'll walk through these renderings, and I'll briefly touch on the materials and how we're protecting the building. So this is the view from Robinson looking south, and you can start to see the dynamic roof shape that is covering not only our northernmost atrium, but also the 5,000 square foot terrace that is connected to our ballroom on the upper level. At night, from the park, we've implemented lighting strategies to make the building glow in the horizon, and just to provide that level of intricacy when you're looking through the trees for any kind of event that we would have out there. And then in the day, this is also a good image to complement the scale, how we have a unique scale to the north. We have our ballroom to the center and more meeting rooms to the south. So again, looking south on Robinson, this is that northernmost neighborhood of meeting rooms as they stack above each other. And at night, we're incorporating some lighting strategies with color-changing LEDs to allow the building to take on a life of its own depending on what's happening, whether that's a wedding inside the ballroom, an event in the park, or any kind of celebration for a Thunder, OU, OSU championship or something along those lines. So the gateway into downtown, this is that new experience that we've been talking about for so long, and the way the architecture starts to point and direct people towards the downtown center is powerful, and how it relates to the new park on the other side of Robinson. Right now, we're showing ground level parking to the south of the building, with the potential, obviously, for this end of the building to expand towards 7th Street. Another shot from the park looking north on Robinson. Again, this gives you a good view of some of the materials that we're choosing. And then this is coming from Shields, looking west at the building. And the important part to notice here is the amount of screening that we have. It's very important to us to screen all of the mechanical equipment in back of house. So the loading area is completely screened in, and all of the mechanical units on the roofs have architectural screening around them, just to allow for a better experience for people coming in from the south along Shields. In the overall aerial, again, just encompassing the scale of all the development that's happening in this part of town. So, and then we have our exterior view on the balcony, acknowledging downtown across the park and all the way down to the Skydance Bridge. So, as far as managing solar issues, we have a west-facing building, which we all know is not ideal, but we're taking all of these architectural solutions to manage that. The orientation of the building, the overhangs of the architecture. We have extremely high-performing glass in all areas of the building. Solid surfaces. Along the meeting rooms, we have mechanical shades to further protect the people inside. We'll be using a print on a portion of the glass, again, to allow for a certain percentage of the sunlight to be blocked as it enters the facility. And then we'll be heavily planting the landscape along the western edge to allow for that landscape to provide some more protection on a lower pedestrian type scale. So the materials that we've used, these materials are well vetted. They're materials that we have experience with, and we've worked closely with not only our MAPS team, but also our subcommittee to come up with a material palette that we're all comfortable with, and that is look and feel and maintenance for the materials. We don't want to specify something that's going to require a lot of work down the road. So the building will be a combination of a natural terracotta material with an exterior wood veneer. We'll also have the high-performance glazing. We'll be using textured concrete for all of the solid areas of the building. On the north, west, and southern facades, we'll be using various textures of plaster to add articulation. And then we have a series of metal panels that we're using to highlight the ballroom roof and that ballroom experience. And so we'll be using reflective materials that play into our earth to sky concept, so that during the day You'll get the dynamic reflections of the sky, and at night it allows us to have some fun with some of the lighting design that we were talking about earlier. So the interiors, we've been mining, obviously, the natural palette as we work through this concept of earth to sky. So each level will relate to each other, but will have a unique kind of look and feel depending on where you're at in the facility. For example, the lower exhibit hall level will have more of a earthy red tone. As we move into the horizon level, we'll start to implement more of a wood grain and canopy feel, and then the sky will play with more of a reflective and metallic palette. So I'll walk through these views. So this is the north atrium looking at the grand stair and the escalators that take you throughout the building. This is on the second level, and you can see how these escalators start to switch back and take you all the way up to the ballroom level and provide these views to the exterior of the building. This is looking at one of our meeting room neighborhoods, and so you can see the wood and how we're using the wood as a wayfinding element to emphasize the entries to the meeting rooms. Again, more meeting rooms to the south. This is the atrium to the south, a similar aesthetic to the one to the north, providing views out and the dynamic vertical circulation that you see that hits each level of the building. Another one of our meeting room areas. Inside of a meeting room, highlighting the glass and the views out to the park and downtown. This is in that same meeting room looking back. Our junior ballroom, if we think about our junior ballroom as meeting room plus and ballroom minus, it's another one of those flexible buildings that we've designed, flexible programs that we've designed into the facility, just allowing that next level of integration with the flexibility of the design. So, and then the ballroom, again, standing in the ballroom pre-function, this is where we really start to talk about that relationship of the ballroom, the pre-function, and the exterior terrace. We'll have 3 30-foot skyfold walls. Those are vertical lifting walls that start to allow that ballroom to expand from not only that 30,000 square foot space to a 45,000 square foot space that reaches out onto the outdoor terrace. And again, inside the ballroom, the capacity of the ballroom is approximately 1,800 people in a seated event. Over the course of the design, we had a few contract amendments. One of them was to study the central utility plant, and it was decided that we would design the plant to allow for the future expansion of the facility and to potentially run the central utility plant for the arena if Cox ever goes away. And this is important because when we decided this, it added some square footage to our building and it increased the footprint a little bit. So again, there was 5 options that we worked closely with the city, and this is the one that was decided on. We have 3 key identity signs around the building. Right now we're proposing the OKC to the northwest. It's buried half in the ground with landscaping, and the other half is what you see protruding into the architecture. To the east, we have halo-lit stainless letters that say Oklahoma City Convention Center, and to the south is where we have our shadow-lit letters that say Oklahoma City Convention Center, just providing that identity on the key corners of the facility. In the exterior, we will have approximately 4 to 5 of these exterior pylons that will carry digital information on what's happening in the convention center and allow for the generic wayfinding of people around the site. Each meeting room in the building will be equipped with digital signs. They will all be accessible from a single location inside the building. These signs will be completely customizable for the operator and the meeting planners that are using the building. Again, eliminating the need for static signs all over the facility and just kind of that next level of customization. Instead of going with an overhead signage strategy, think airport terminal, we went with a series of these pylons spread out on each level. Each of these pylons will carry information on wayfinding within the building, and they will all have these interactive touch screen systems on them to allow for the navigation of the facility. So this is all something that is going to be on a single system that we'll be specifying that essentially runs the entire building. Each one of these pylons will, of course, correspond to the design of the level that it's on. and allow for that kind of intuitive wayfinding. So one of our additional scopes for this was to take a look at how we were going to address 4th Street. 4th Street is an important street to us, but it also requires input from the future hotel that's going to be at the north of it. So for us, 4th Street is going to be an ongoing endeavor in coordination with the hotel team. And again, this was just us putting our best foot forward and putting something out there to at least get a cost to what it would cost to design 4th Street. To the south, again, it's not in our scope, but we've included it in this document so that we could include what it would cost to put surface parking to the south of the convention center. Again, if this would move forward, there would be coordination between us and the park team and all of the Project 180 happenings that will be happening along Robinson Street. On the exterior of our building, we have a series of casual seating areas that are similar to the ones that we have on the inside, heavily landscaped to provide that protection from the elements, not only along the north, but on the south and in the center plaza that's going to be accepting people from the plaza, or from the park on the main crosswalk on the Old 5th Street. And so, as far as plant materials go, we're working really hard with our local landscape designer, and we're working with the landscape designer that has actually been responsible for the implementation of all the Project 180 stuff. So he's extremely familiar with local plant materials and stuff that will thrive in this environment. So we're being very conscious of the material palette as far as the landscape. And a part of our study was to analyze a valet circulation condition for the convention center. Our study concluded that we have 3 options. One is a U-turn down Robinson at 6th Street. The other is the potential of a roundabout, and the other one is the ability to make a left on 7th Street and circle back around the surface parking lot and head north onto the convention center, drop-off. This was a hot topic. We had good discussion at our subcommittee meeting, and it was agreed that this is going to take more coordination, not only from our team, but the park team, the potential hotel team, and even other planning and public works to really nail this down, as this is more about a district-wide plan than it is just about convention center drop-off. So that's where the amendment has come from in our preliminary report, just acknowledging that over the next few months there will be heavy coordination between all parties on how we address traffic in this area. So our cost estimate, the building construction budget is right at $194.06. We have been managing the cost over the entire design process. When we submitted preliminary report, ADG did an independent cost estimate of our preliminary report. We spent days with ADG's cost estimator and our own cost estimator reconciling the cost strategy, and we're confident with 100% design development or preliminary report where we're still within striking distance of the budget. You see that our number is slightly under the budget, which is positive, but we also need to acknowledge that as we keep drawing and we keep designing and documenting that we will be tracking this budget, and it's something that we'll be discussing with our subcommittee on regular intervals as we go through the remainder of the project. And I threw these slides in here because I didn't actually get a chance to talk to our subcommittee about it this past week because we went pretty long, but I was in Sydney before the holidays for the opening of our new convention center. And in the convention center industry, typically the USA is a little bit behind the world as far as implementing some of these strategies. And I took some of these photos because some of the things that we've been talking with our subcommittee about since the very beginning, we've actually now implemented in this Sydney Convention Center, and we were there and for the grand opening, and we saw how people interacted with the building and how successful it was. And I think it's just important to note that Oklahoma City will be one of the first facilities in the United States to really start to implement some of these global strategies that we're seeing within the industry. And so, again, it's something that I think we all we are proud of as architects, but it's something as a industry and city that we can all be proud of for kind of taking a chance. So that's it. Any questions from anyone?
Any questions from the,
Just a comment. I really appreciate the wayfinding, the pylons, the technology. It's, to me, it makes or breaks a facility, especially a convention center nowadays. I love what we're seeing. I also recently experienced a lot of technology and that connection to elements in Seoul. So I'm really excited about where this is going. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm very proud of it. And I understand we're still working on the traffic. So we all know that's an issue that is ongoing. Glad we're not finished with that yet.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Just had one comment too. I'd like to echo Sue's sentiments, and certainly the fact that you guys have really embraced this convention center as if it were your own. And everything you're putting in this really shows that you're helping us to set the Oklahoma standard once again and the bar higher, and the park really appreciates all the work that you're doing to coordinate the efforts together.
Thank you.
Keep it up.
So just to clarify, the subcommittee was in favor of the preliminary report, but there was extended discussion about the traffic and about access, and that's why the resolution, the amended resolution, mentions the traffic and access, that they want to make sure that we continue to look at that. So if you choose to move approval of this, it would be appropriate to move the amended resolution.
I'm curious, your comment regarding the budget and the phrase striking distance, within striking distance. Could you speak a little bit more about what that means?
We say that because when we're going through these estimates, there's always a sense of risk when you're assigning cost to something that, potentially won't be purchased for another year or 18 months. And so, we're confident in our cost estimators that they have a pretty good thumb on how the economy is going to respond. But again, as we all know from 2008 through 2011, the economy can flux. And we think that we are in a safe zone to bid this project, either late this year or early 2018. And so we're always conscious about saying that something is final when you're playing with something that is out of our control. So when we say striking distance, that's what we really mean.
And of course, I understand that.
Yeah.
But could you tell me just a little bit on your history in terms of how often have you guys missed that?
Well, I can say that our convention center practice has never delivered a project that was over budget. So.
okay, we have before us a revised recommendation to accept the report. Do I have a motion?
I move approval with the revised resolution.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? All in favor? Aye? Aye. All opposed? Okay, recommendation accepted, passes. Okay, up next, thank you very much, Mr. Polish, appreciate it. Good presentation. Okay, next up we have item number 5, which is recommend resolution approving change order number 1, MAPS 3 Convention Center demolition package 2, increase of $20,000, project M3-C007.
This is a project we have ongoing, or had ongoing, to do demolition in the area of the convention center, and when they started working in that one of those lots, they found that the building had been knocked down and dirt had been pushed on top of foundations. So we had to pull the foundations up out of the ground, and that was the $20,000. And this comes with the recommendation from the subcommittee.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second? Second? Okay, any further discussion? All in favor, aye? Aye. All opposed? Nay? Okay, motion passes. Okay, up next we have item number 6, recommend resolution approving change order number 4, amendment number 3 of the MAPS 3 sidewalk phase 3 project 2 improvements, increase of $3,113, project M3-W003A.
This is what we would consider a routine change order and amendment. The change order included some push-button modifications for $970, and then amended quantities, as we've talked before, as we go through construction on these projects. We amend the quantities, and I like to do them monthly to make sure that we stay up to speed on where we are. And this comes also with the recommendation from the subcommittee.
Any comments?
Move approval.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Aye. All opposed? Nay. Motion passes. Okay, next up is item number 7, recommend a resolution approving change order number 24, MAPS 3, Oklahoma State Fairgrounds Phase 2, new expo building increase of $194 million. Is that correct?
No.
138, okay, thousand, I'm sorry. $194,138.98. Sorry about that. Okay. David?
This is a change order for the expo building. Item number 1 is by far the largest item on there, and I will tell you that this was already completed. The building was designed per code. The strobes were put in as they should be, but as Fire Marshal got out there and saw how the program works with the partitions and the curtains and things that they have out there, it was actually blocking some of those strobes. So we had to do a second set of strobes that were higher up so that they could be seen when all the trade shows are going on out there. And then item 2, State Fair staff requested some additional electrical work. Item 3 was Health Department in their final review and walkthrough. They wanted some of the gaps between the columns that come down and the brick to be sealed so that debris could not get back in there and bugs and things. Then there was restroom signage. The restrooms are spectacular in this facility, and but the building is so big that it's hard to see where the restrooms are if you're on the other side of the building. So what was added was the brushed aluminum large universal symbols for restrooms above the doors. So those were added in there also. Then there was some wiring that was left out for a switch. That this isn't a wall switch. This is a large switch for the main electrical feed outside, and the as-built showed that there was one, and it ended up not being there. So, or vice versa. But anyway, that was a change for exterior wiring, and that gives the fairgrounds a secondary loop of power into the building, so that if one half of that is lost, the building doesn't lose complete power. Then item 6 was additional hot water storage. As they began to operate, it was found that we just didn't have enough hot water storage. The piping is so large and there's so much volume out there that it was storing all the hot water in the pipes and wasn't keeping the temperature that it needed. And then there were some additional exit lights that the fire marshal requested. So this comes at the recommendation of the subcommittee.
All right, we have a motion. Okay, we have a second. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Any questions? All in favor? Aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay, motion passed. Item number 8 is recommended resolution approving change order number 1, MAPS 3, Oklahoma State Fairgrounds Expo Building concession stand interior signage increase of $6,300. Project M3-F002D. David?
This is the lettering that goes above the concession stand. So there's 4 concession stands roughly on each corner of the building. We have large signs that indicate the kind of food that those concession stands are serving. Once we got out there, we didn't feel like the letters were big enough, so they changed the font. Instead of making them taller, they thickened them up. And that's what the fairground staff wanted. So that was $6,300 to change that font, and this also comes at the recommendation from the subcommittee.
Do you have a motion? Do we have a second? Second. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay, up next is item number 9, recommend resolution approving change order number 1, amendment number 1, MAPS 3, Oklahoma State Fairgrounds Expo Building LED lighting display column wrap interior signage, increase of $215,809. David?
There's two items on this, a change order and an amendment. The change order is for software licenses that were left out of the project, but more importantly, the bigger item is the amendment, and this amendment is very much like what we do sidewalks and trails, where we already have quantities established and prices established. So we're originally doing 10 of these 6-foot-tall circular wraparound LED signs that are out in the columns within the main expo hall, and this fairgrounds wants to add 2 more that's in that pre-function space to the south in the lobby, essentially. So we already had prices for each of these, and that's where the $198,000 comes from. So it's 2 additional with a price that was already established during the bid. And this comes at the recommendation from the Fairgrounds Subcommittee.
Okay, do we have a motion? Have a motion and a second. So any further discussion? All in favor, aye? Aye. All opposed, no? Okay, motion number 9, item number 9 passes. Item number 10 is recommended resolution approving partial acceptance and placement of maintenance bond number 09153149 into effect retroactively of May 5, 2016, MAPS 3, Oklahoma River, Phase 3, Whitewater Facility, approving maintenance bond number 2, project M3-R004, WC-0817, and SC-0912. Dave?
The warranty, or the maintenance bonds, are essentially a warranty that we get from the contractor. If you remember, the Whitewater opened last spring. Essentially on May 5th is when we determined that they had full use of it. Contractor still had punch list items and had a couple of other items that he needed to do within change orders. And we continued to hold off on that. He has completed those, and in fairness to the contractor, because the Whitewater has been operating since May, the pumps have been running, the filters have been used, the kayaks have been used, all that, that we have backdated their maintenance bond to start May 5th of last year, with the exception of the things that are included in change orders 18 and 19. So they have a new maintenance bond, so we get our warranty essentially starts as soon as those are finished. But the previous items that we've had use of will be backdated for that. So we are accepting the Whitewater facility except for the items that are in change orders 18 and 19, which are some minor things. And this comes at the recommendation from the subcommittee.
Mike?
I guess there'll also be a maintenance bond on the bridge, or is that part of 18 and 19?
That's part of 18 and 19, yes, sir.
The bridge and the other thing.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
I move approval.
Have a second? Okay, we have a motion and a second for recommended resolution. All in favor? Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? No? Okay, motion. Item 10 passes. Item number 11 is recommended resolution authorizing use of excess Oklahoma City capital improvement sales tax funds in the amount of $159,377 for construction, furniture, fixtures, and equipment from the MAPS 3 Senior Health and Wellness Center project number 1, project M3H002.
To make sure everyone is clear on this is asking for additional program funds. The Wellness Center, one, has we used our construction budget for construction, and we have contingency money that we continue to use and buy equipment that the operator desires. But the operator has asked for some additional equipment, and we need additional funding for that. So that equipment is listed in the memo. It's the paint easels. It's some aerobic and water equipment, some indoor spin class cycles. They're essentially stationary bicycles for spin classes. Some window treatments for the south side of the building, some ceiling fans in the fitness center, and then gym upgrades. The gym was built so that we could stay within budget. It is what we considered a gymnasium. It has what we call a cement board with exposed screws. It's got exposed plastic on the walls that holds the insulation in, again, as a gym. The operator intends to use it more as a, well, not more, but also as a meeting room. So they would like a nicer finish in the gym. So the proposal is to do sheetrock on the walls all the way up to the soffits. I know that the operator is here if you have any questions to talk to him. And there was extensive discussion at the subcommittee level that we did not have a quorum. So I'll let Mr. Dover take it from there.
Yeah, as David mentioned, we were one member short of a quorum. And the discussion yesterday was I explained to the committee what happened at our December board meeting at the advisory board when I brought forth the idea of a fifth wellness center. And there was quite a discussion, as I'm sure most of you all will remember. And in fact, before yesterday's meeting, I even went back and reviewed our meeting in December on the video on the city's website. And what I said yesterday is that the message that I got loud and clear from this advisory board is that we decided, although we didn't vote, but there was generally a consensus, that unless something came forth that was considered an emergency, that we would hold off on any additional funding requests from any subcommittee so that all of the subcommittees and all of their needs could be reviewed and we could prioritize given how many dollars were available. And that's what I said, and that's why this is on the agenda today, is that because the operator, Mr. Fleming, who's Bill Fleming, chair of the board, feels very, very strongly about the necessity of these items. So I did ask Bill to come today. I know Cecilia has some remarks when I'm done, but I do hope we allow Bill to kind of make his case, quite frankly. I'm not sure I could do it in the same way that he could. So with that in mind, that's where we are, and that's basically what happened yesterday. And I know Cecilia has some remarks.
We were short of a quorum, and so we obviously couldn't vote on whether or not we all agreed. But I think Tom was there yesterday and gave us a lot of great insight as somebody who sits in all of the advisory committees. And what he shared was his concern that in this very first senior wellness center, that it be the model, it be the standard. And so the requests that have been made by the operator in regards to like the bikes, when I heard it yesterday, I was a bit concerned because I'm just like, why do we need more bikes? I've been in the exercise room, there's bikes. But we actually have empty rooms that were actually intended for this use, but due to the time of construction, we had to make a lot of decisions. And so this is one of those decisions that they've come back around and said it really would be important to the programming that's going to be offered. The ceiling fans, I'm sure that's pretty explainable why we need ceiling fans, and the window treatments. The upgrades to the gym was one I was on the fence about, but then came around after the conversations. It is a senior wellness center, and the purpose of the gym was to be a gym. But as Mr. Fleming shared with us yesterday, and I think the 2 days that they've had open houses, they've had over 500 people come through. And they've already hosted events in the gym, which are more like receptions, like proms or dances or wedding receptions, things like that. And so the unfinished gym, it actually looks like an unfinished gym, which in the original building design, I don't think we really gave thought to how the community would actually respond to the room. But it seems like they're going to actually have more requests for it to be used as like a host for a reception than they will as a gym. And so upgrading it will allow for them to accommodate those types of things. And so I think keeping in mind that we want this first senior wellness center to open and be the standard for all others, since this is how the city will be judging us, then it would be my own personal recommendation that we move forward with it.
All right. I understand that Mr. Fleming is here. Do we want to? Would you like to step forward and comment on?
Thank you. My name is Bill Fleming, and it's my pleasure to have the opportunity to address you this morning. As I was talking to Mr. Dover yesterday, one of the things that I shared with him is in our original proposal to the city to operate this facility, a source of the income that we would use to defray expenses would come from rental and different avenues of that sort. Membership alone will never pay for the cost of this wellness center. We'll have to combine a large range of things in order to offer the programming that we want to the city. The gymnasium originally was going to be finished with sheetrock due to budget constraints and trying to squeeze that in. That was removed and taken from it. And I think one of the problems that created that is this center was so long in getting started from when the budget was established that the construction cost creep actually made us have to cut out some things that normally would have been in there. The equipment that we requested for volleyballs, basketballs, spin cycles, things to do water aerobics with, steps and things of that nature, those are equipment items that we absolutely need to do the programming. We have none of those things now. It's not that we're asking for additional equipment. We have none of them. And the window shades are needed. If you're out there at certain hours of the day, there are 2 offices and the aerobics room that are almost unusable due to the sunlight coming in. And so we really need to add those things. As was stated earlier, the fans are kind of self-explanatory. You want to clear that air out in the gymnasium and keep it smelling fresh, keep it smelling good. I would share with you that we put a sign up on Rockwell last week. We've done no other promotion, no other advertising. We did tours from 11 till 2, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. We have had over 500 people come through there. The first Monday, we were almost overwhelmed. There were so many people. We have mailings going out now after the ribbon cutting ceremony and the things going on next Tuesday at 2 o'clock and a promotion from that. I think we're going to be absolutely blown away at how many people use this wellness center. And we want to give an exceptional programming experience, and we want it to be the model that everyone would come to look at and maybe perhaps emulate in the future. So I'd ask you to pass this on to the City Council and give us an opportunity to make this thing all that it can possibly be. And I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Thank you, Mr. Fleming. I appreciate it very much.
I have a question, if I may. Without the upgrades to the gym on the facade, on the wall, how do you feel that that would impact your operating revenue over the course of, say, 5 years?
Well, I think that one of the things we've found is that there's going to be a huge demand both after hours and maybe in programming to use that gym for other things. I'll give you one example. My cardiologist, Dr. Pamela Craven, is a ballroom dancer. She competes all over the country and has won contests, and some of you may even use her or know her. Her club would like to use that for ballroom dancing. So we've talked about perhaps doing ballroom dancing classes for our seniors and for the members of the Wellness Center, and then maybe renting it out to her group and other group in the evening after hours. And there are a lot of other opportunities that we can use for that gymnasium past just basketball, pickleball, and things of that nature, which we obviously need the equipment for that. But this can be a real showplace and a real center for the community out there to do a lot of different things. And it will greatly enhance our income and allow us to do the programming and to defray the expenses as originally proposed.
If there were another substrate or process that could be constructed that would be less expensive, that would still serve that need, would you be willing to consider that?
If we can get it dressed up and looking good and where it looks presentable, I'm certainly all for saving money because there are a lot of things that it could be spent for. I think this is probably, and Mr. Todd could correct me, I think this is probably set as the maximum amount. I'm not sure there's been a bid that's actually come in yet, David, on the gymnasium.
No, these are just estimates right now.
I assume sheetrock on a gym is not a typical finish because balls bouncing off of it and things would tend to crack it. So,
Well, the plan right now is to use a quarter-inch sheetrock that tends to be denser, and it will have the cement board behind it as a backing, so it won't be as flexible. And then we'll extend it on up to the ceiling. I don't anticipate this getting beat up like some of our Maps for Kids elementary school gymnasiums have, because it's adults. But yeah, things still happen.
I have a question. If you don't get the equipment, what will you use for equipment if you don't get it approved by the city council?
We will not be able to do that programming until we can find someone to donate that equipment or fund it some way.
Okay, if we and the city council approve the equipment, how long will it take you to get it?
I think the equipment could be delivered in time for our opening, which is scheduled in, we intend to start programming March the 20th, have the facility open March the 1st so people can come in and continue to tour it and sign up, and we'll allow them to use some parts of the facility. Our actual fee structure will start April the 1st, so those people that use it during March won't be charged for that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm wondering if maybe we shouldn't look into an alternative for the gymnasium wall covering.
We will continue to look at that. This would be like a base fix, if you will. It's been suggested that maybe we cover the whole walls with padding. There are some other options, but we're confident that the number we have would allow us to do at least this base fix that I described.
I think in our discussions last month or the month before, whenever it was, when we talked about this, we expressed that we didn't want to start allocating the excess funds or the contingency funds from the program until we had more information about the park and the convention center. But I think also in that discussion we talked about minor amounts that might be necessary to finish up an existing project. And so in my mind, I don't know that we're breaking our ideals to wait in approving something of this matter.
And that's my thinking as well. And in this case, it's responding to what appears to be a real need and responding to the community, which I think is certainly within our mandate, and it kind of fits the criteria of an emergency, or at least in terms of being urgent and an illustrated need. And so that's why I think it fits that criteria.
I'd just like to ask one thing, is taking that into consideration, are we going to use this as a learning experience, and maybe if, any further gyms for the other health and wellness centers, that will include that in the bid up front maybe next time?
Well, that's a good point, and I understand what you're saying, but the goal for the wellness centers all along has been that each one is individual. They're not all the same. They respond to the community that they serve, immediate community that they serve. But we did change the pool at Wellness Center 2 whenever we went to a saltwater pool at 1. We did provide equity there. So that is something we can certainly and will certainly look at and try to do. But like I said, sometimes the programs aren't really apples to apples.
But if all the centers are going to be using their gymnasium for programming for revenue, I think that's something that needs to be looked at across the board so that we're not setting up one center for success and leaving other centers to maybe suffer.
Point taken.
Well,
So would this be a maximum amount?
Yes.
and remember, the finished walls were included that was the original design of the gym. It just got scaled back due to costs. So originally it was designed to have finished walls.
There were other things that were value engineered out as well, and so but this is one that was deemed worthy of being put back in, essentially.
This has been so hard for me. This is really, really a dilemma. By being on the subcommittee and chairing the subcommittee for the Senior Health and Wellness Centers, I'm passionate about the success of these centers. Having said that, I'm also a member of this board. And quite frankly, the message that I received at our December meeting is that unless these requests by any particular subcommittee would be an emergency, we were going to hold off and look at the needs of all of the subcommittees. To be real frank, for me, this is not an emergency. I think that there is a time, and I will be right there when if this would not pass, to argue for the importance of these additions as we consider other considerations, for instance, sidewalks. But it's just, I hope people understand this dilemma for me. I'm trying to look past my own kind of partisan interest because I've been working on this for almost 7 years on wellness centers. But I heard loud and clear what this board said to me in December. And with that in mind, I just wanted that point for the record.
Okay, we have a motion before us and a second. Is there any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, before we vote, I just want to say I am a charter member of the Wellness Center number 1. I'm not sure that disqualifies from voting, but I'll abstain on the vote as well.
Thank you, Bob. Okay. Oh, okay. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. So we will, and if there's no further discussion on the issue, then we will take a vote. All in favor, say aye. All opposed? Nay. 3 nays, and how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the motion passes 5 to 3. 5 to 3. I voted nay. All right. That takes us to item number 12. Recommend resolution approving amendment number 4 to the contract with Brookville Equipment Corporation, MAPS 3, streetcar vehicle increase, $453,534,645, project M3S 005.
These next items are all related, and they are all streetcar related. We had the good fortune of when we received bids for the main line, that we were roughly $6 million under budget. That is not contingency, that is budgeted construction project money. So we've been working with the subcommittee to determine what we wanted to do with that additional construction money because we have plenty of needs. And we devised a list of needs, some of which could help reduce cost of operations for Embark, and some of them help with the efficiency of the system ultimately. And they asked us to break these out individually so that they could vote on each individual item. So the first item here, item 12, is for an additional car. This cost that you see here, the $4.5 million, was already set out in the bid from Brookville, and it's set up in the contract that we need to order that by a specific time. I believe that's before April for the car.
Yes, that's correct. For the first vehicle. And in still delivery, we were hoping to get that, I'm sorry, David, I'll cut in here. We were hoping to get that tagged into to follow in production right behind our 6th car. However, after Brookville took a look at it, they've already started the production for, I think it's some additional Milwaukee cars. And so this 7th car will come in after that, but we will still be delivered before the grand opening or the opening of the streetcar system.
Let me just point out that this isn't getting another car just for the sake of getting another car. What this does is we always intended to have 5 cars on the system with a 6th as a spare in case there was a breakdown. So if there is a breakdown and there's a long lead time for parts, we would have that 6th car in service. And if something was to happen to an additional car, and I realize you could take this in infinitum, but if something was to happen even small on a car, then we would be down as far as the numbers in the system. This also allows us more cars during large events. It allows us an additional car that we could put on what we have described as the Bricktown Loop, which is the loop that would circulate at the southern end of the system. So this comes with unanimous recommendation from the subcommittee, and I'll answer any questions.
Okay, just to kind of refresh memories, my memory in particular, we the original route called for 5 cars.
5 with the spare.
No, the original route, it says, the original contract was for 5 cars. And then in about this time last year, we redesigned the route to accommodate the new location of the convention center. And it was determined that we'd need an extra car to do that. And we allocated from our program contingency funds $3 million to go toward the construction of the additional mileage and the purchase of another car. And that car was ordered last May, if I'm reading this correctly.
Right.
Okay. And that was the
They
car.
got us to 6.
Got us to 6. And then the bids came in, and we were $7 million or something under the bids. And so in a sense, the $3 million we transferred over that really wasn't required, but now we have that money there, and you're wanting to use some of that now to buy a 7th car.
Right.
Even though the 6th was what was presumably required for the additional mileage.
6 required for the additional mileage for the additional loop into Bricktown, and I think that was the absolute minimum we felt we could have. The 7th does give us a little bit more flexibility.
Right, so it is truly a spare. The 6 was required to operate the Bricktown Loop, and now we're saying a 7th. And all along, or at least in our committee, we understood that a spare would be needed. But then the Bricktown Loop, the spare became basically the vehicle for the Bricktown Loop, so now new spares. So one of the numbers that we saw yesterday from Doug is I think before this vehicle, the spare part capacity is about 20%, which we're told is pretty lean. It's, the streetcar industry considers that very, very lean as far as spare part capacity. With the additional streetcar, the spare parts would be about 40%. Am I saying that right? So, and that's then considered, what acceptable, more of a standard number that you would want to see. And that car may actually be operational sometimes too, as David mentioned, when you have certain events. Yeah.
Right. Nathaniel, I think I understand this, but I want to hear it from you again. Because we were under budget on the original bid, there was quite a bit of money left that allows us to do this. So this comes from the streetcar contingency program fund. I know you can't foresee the future, just as we heard about the convention center. But in your mind, do you think that your committee, the streetcar, will be coming back and needing further dollars for whatever that might be? Or do you think you guys are still going to be within your program contingency?
Well, yeah, the rest of this page of our agenda has a lot of items on it, but I think they all still fit within the streetcar budget. So you're really asking, will we kind of run out of that and then still need to do more kind of one-offs?
Program contingencies or excess, we need more money out of the excess.
Yes, using excess. Now, I know we all, as I said before, we all are going to have wants and desires. I understand that. But I'm talking about, again, I'm trying to find the appropriate term here, but in terms of operating a streetcar the way we all want to see that streetcar operated, you think that the additional programs or things you'd like to do that might come from excess funds, if you didn't get that, if that didn't happen for whatever reason, we would still have a successful streetcar operation in Oklahoma City?
The short answer is yes. And so my own, pseudo layperson understanding of it is essentially there's nothing else that I can think of that's kind of hanging out there of like, well, gosh, this is going to hit at some point, and I'm going to have to explain it. I mean, so that the big items have already come, right? The big contracts, the vehicles and the rail have already come, and those were good news. This vehicle and the other items you see here, this vehicle obviously dwarfs everything else you see here. Everything else is like spare parts and software and that. There's nothing else that I can think of that's kind of hanging out there in the wing that's going to put us over our program amount and have to get into, or within our project amount and have to get into program funds.
No, I understand. And the reason I say that, I think, Kim, of the park, I think we knew early on that the amount of dollars that are in that park is not going to be enough to do the things that we want to do. And probably we are going to be asking for contingency excess funds. That's where that question and that comment comes from.
Yeah, fundamentally it comes down to headway, time between vehicles, and it comes down to the reach of the rail and interconnects, number of stops. I mean, like the big things that really drive, and then the technology to kind of work with the traffic signals to help speed that along. I mean, those are like the big things that we really look at as far as success versus not success, and that's all, as far as I know, that's in there. There may be something where it's like we got to add a conduit to this stop to make sure that the wireless work. Those types of things, but nothing else that I can think of that's big.
And I would just like to add what Nathaniel said is, like, I think it was Kim, you had mentioned earlier, we're all very interested in the success of these programs, and I think that the seventh car is essential to make sure that we maintain the headway, that the people can rely on it, and then it's not going to be an issue as far as circulation goes.
And I would also imagine that we're gaining economies of scale by ordering this car now in this part of the process, that we're never going to get this price again on car number 7.
And David will remind me the number, but the contract does call for like 5 is the base number, then plus like 8 more or something like that in the contract. So we actually do have this sort of guarantee that we can actually get up to 13 some odd vehicles at that same price. There might be an escalator for
Right, there's
inflation.
escalations each month from here on out.
But yes, it's true if you want to kind of be early on that escalation trend, or if you want to take advantage of the contract as it is and doing it now. But actually, you mentioning that made me think of something else. So Jason Fairbrush from Embark mentioned that they're working on this idea of a consortium with Dallas. Dallas is using the same vehicles that we are. So the idea would be that you would have this kind of repository of spare parts that instead of us keeping every single spare part that we can think of on the premises and having to pay for them and pay to store them, you can imagine some specialty parts, being with Brookville or wherever they need to be. And then as part of this consortium with Dallas, we basically reimburse the consortium and basically leverage each other's buying power and kind of de-risking the need for certain parts and not having to store them. So Embark is certainly looking at cost-effective ways to ensure continuous operations and minimize that overhang.
That's the kind of brilliant thinking I love to hear.
So my concern is a little bit like Michael's in that, the reason you have the excess monies in there partly because you've already drawn against the program excess funds or contingency we did previously. And I would hate to get to the position that you use that money for this car or any of these other things you have, and then later on say, oh, gee, now we need more money. So how much contingency is left in the streetcar after these allocations? There's still sufficient contingency, you think, to handle normal overruns sort of stuff?
Yes, sir. There's a little
normal overruns.
Little over $4 million right now for contingency on the rail project.
After all of these items today?
So we have a resolution before us. Do we have a motion?
I'll move to approve.
We have a motion and a second, so any further discussion? So all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. All right. That brings us to item number 13, recommend authorization of staff to negotiate engineering service contract amendment with Jacobs Engineering in the amount not to exceed $114,000 for the design of the modern streetcar turnback, MAPS 3, modern streetcar mainline project M3-S007.
I'll try to make this short because this could get lengthy. During the original design, we recognized that it would be very advantageous for the operations to have what we call a turnback. So basically a short circuit within the route. So if something was to happen up in Midtown, if there was an accident or some sort of street blockage, we would have a way of turning short of getting up in there and coming back. Likewise, we have that same option in front of Santa Fe Station on the southern part of it. But as we went through the project, we did not feel that we could afford it at the time, so it was taken out of the budget, or out of the project. Now, as things are showing, that we have this money that we can do some things to provide for this in the future. So this is not to provide actually for the turnback itself, but this is to do the engineering necessary to put the switches in at the time that we build the track. And they'll just be switches that will just dead end into the street there on Fifth Street until such time that we can add the rail and do that. But that keeps us from having to tear that out in the future and disrupt service for the streetcar at a future point. So this allows Jacobs to do engineering to what we consider about 60% and allows them to order that special track work that would be needed to make those connections in the
This
future.
includes the design work and the parts?
This is just the design work.
Just the design. Is the parts a later one? Okay.
And I'd just like to add to this that if we see future expansion beyond MAPS 3 out to the Health Sciences Center, then this turnback is absolutely critical. You won't be able to do it without it. Or you will have to go back in and do major reconstruction on those sections of the line to add this capability. And we all certainly hope that we see the expansion of the system beyond this in the future.
But this does not include the block or 2 blocks of rail or whatever it would be.
It does not, but without jinxing us, I will tell you that we have excess rail within the order, and we do have enough to do that piece in there.
Right.
If we have the funds.
But you would still have to allocate some construction cost to lay it.
Right.
What is all that estimated to be?
I don't have a number on that.
Are we talking millions or?
No, I think it would be within $1 million or so. Doug, can you help me on that? The construction cost for doing that, connecting the pieces on Fifth Street, do you have a number? $2 million, okay.
Is something you'd anticipate you'd still be able to cover with the contingency you have within?
We potentially could, yes.
Or a future expansion effort could also cover that.
Again, this just helps us so that in the future we don't have to tear out existing track and disrupt the operations.
Okay, so we have a resolution before us, so I hear a motion. Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If there's no further discussion, we'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? No? Motion passes. Brings us to item number 14, recommend authorization to use excess construction funds in the amount not to exceed $126,000 for Midtown Turnback MAPS 3 Streetcar Mainline Project M3S-007.
So after we do the engineering on this would be to actually order those switches to put in those spots that I just described.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, then we'll proceed with a vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. Motion passes. Brings us to item number 15, recommend authorization and use of excess construction funds in the amount not to exceed $360,000 to purchase computer services software for the MAPS 3 Modern Streetcar Mainline Project M3-S007.
This is certainly an item that, as I mentioned, would help reduce operational costs for Embark and their startup costs. So this is, as it says, to purchase the servers and software and computers that would operate the streetcar itself and help to operate with the people involved. And this comes with the authorization or the recommendation from the subcommittee.
Did we not have anything in the original plan to operate the system?
At the time, it was to be on Embark to determine what they needed and how they were going to operate it. Since they have determined that and have asked us to see if we could help fund it in order to reduce those operational costs, which everybody has been concerned about.
Okay, we have a recommended resolution authorizing use of excess construction funds. Do we have a motion? We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Motion passes. Okay, number 16, recommend authorization use of excess construction funds in the amount not to exceed $65,000 to purchase specialty tools for the MAPS 3 modern streetcar mainline project. David?
Again, this is an item that Embark was going to have to pick up for tools that are needed for the streetcar, and this would purchase those tools for them.
And my understanding, I asked the question yesterday, is that while we anticipated generally the cost of some kinds of tools, we were really waiting on getting an operator, Herzog, before we
That's right. That's
became
a good
more
point.
specific, essentially, on what exactly and how much.
And this is a result of Embark going out to the other cities that are operating streetcars and seeing what kind of special tooling they needed. And this list includes those tools that they've identified. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. All in favor, aye. All opposed, nay. Motion passes. Item number 17 is recommend authorizing usage of excess construction funds, the amount not to exceed $300,000 to purchase spare parts for the MAPS 3 modern streetcar mainline.
Within the contract, we originally had spare parts, but this is more spare parts. Some of these spare parts are very expensive. They include what we call the truck, which is the whole assembly that the wheels are in. It might be a new motor, it's brakes, it's various electronic parts here and there. So this is additional spare parts to be added to the original spare parts list. And as Mr. Hardy mentioned, it has progressed now that we have, or Embark has identified a potential operator in the discussions. We have been able to fine-tune that list more. And this comes with a recommendation from the subcommittee.
We have a motion and a second.
I have a
Any further
question.
discussion?
If we're looking at possibly entering into consortium with Dallas, how would this affect that?
My understanding from JC yesterday is that this contemplates that. So, the consortium would be in addition to this. These spare parts are perhaps not quite as exotic as the spare parts in the consortium. It's kind of my takeaway from it. But yeah, it presumes that there would also be a consortium.
These are the spares that are specifically needed to support the existing plant. So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, let's proceed to a vote. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, nay. Passes. This brings us to item number 18, which is recommend authorization use of excess construction funds, the amount not to exceed $341,000 for the maintenance way vehicles for the MAPS 3 streetcar mainline project. David?
Along with operating the streetcar, you have to have various vehicles that maintain the system itself. So, for instance, a boom truck is needed so that you can reach up into the catenary wire. Large trucks that are strong enough in case one of the streetcars breaks down that you could tow with them. And then just various vehicles that you would need to traverse the system and do checkup and maintenance and those kind of things. And these were things that Embark was going to have to pick up, and this would pay for those vehicles. And notice it is not to exceed. We will do this off of city contract where we can and try and conserve every dollar that we can. We're not going to spend it just for the sake of spending it.
I am going along with all these based on the assumption that the subcommittee knows what their dire needs are, and that there are still remaining enough contingency funds to handle, normal expectations down the line. We're not
Just to add,
contingency now.
to add to what you're
Properly
talking about,
identifying
we identified
priorities.
that we were going to have the excess funds, so yes, we started prioritizing a list. And while the resolutions here did not come in order of what those priorities were, these are all of the items that we have identified as a subcommittee that we needed to pursue to get the project going.
Michael, that was actually a point I wanted to speak to. Before we talked about the extra streetcar, we looked at a contingency left in your budget of about $8 million. And now if we get all the way through this resolution and the one after that, that takes us roughly to $6.3 million, which leaves you $1.7 million in your contingency for the rest of the project. So that, again, seems ample carrying forward.
David, was the number 4? I thought I heard, yeah.
Well,
So I wonder where the disconnect
I
is.
understood it to be 4 also, based on my review, within the project. Yeah, so our line item on my report here shows 4.8 within the construction contingency.
Was that before or after?
That is separate from this because we're still carrying 5.9 in the construction and FF&E line.
So these all are coming out of the construction line, which is the subject about as a result of this.
Right, it has nothing to do with contingency within the project. It's all excess construction funds.
So this will essentially spend down that 5.9, but then the other...
It'll take us down to
the
about
actual-
60,000.
Yeah. Well, actually, one of them is, this last one, the number 19 is amended to...
Well, plus, it doesn't come out of the same place. That comes out of the A&E line item, not out of construction.
And the construction and FFE is the same, that's collapsed.
Yes, sir.
Zane,
That's,
just a comment on this resolution. I'm going to abstain from this because my son makes those trucks, and so hopefully we'll be buying from him.
Okay. Thank you, Sue.
and one more narrative note from me is that essentially you're kind of seeing all these hit at once, and it's kind of like, well, gosh, didn't we know about these things? But most of these items were things that we knew generally were going to be needed, but we're waiting on working with Herzog to say, like, okay, what do we really need, and what does it look like, and which one should we get? And I mean, so that's why that's my impression, anyways, is why it's kind of coming in a wave. Is that maybe a good way of looking at that?
Well, it's a good problem that we're facing because we had excess construction money.
And I'd add to that, if some of you know some of the subcommittee members, I will tell you that they were pushing for these very items many, 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 many months ago, almost a year ago. So we wanted to wait until we actually had a better idea of what these items were going to be, what the tools were going to be, what vehicles were needed, what software was needed, and what switching was needed before we pushed these items to the board. So we've been discussing these items for well over a year.
I just thought I was at a streetcar subcommittee meeting for a minute, that's all, I guess.
But to make clear, part of the reason we have the excess construction money is because we did allocate $3 million from the program contingencies or the program excess funds to
That's true.
to the streetcar a year ago. So,
That's true.
yeah. So.
Okay, if there is no further discussion, we'll take we have a motion and a second. So if there are no further discussion, then we'll go over to a vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Motion passes. That brings us to item number 18, which is a revised recommended resolution approving amendment number 2 to the contract for engineering and consulting services for Jacobs Engineering Incorporated MAP 3 Transit Streetcar Project increase. And I believe the revised increase is $207,700.
This is an amendment to Jacob's contract for several things. The traction power substation, site planning and design that they've done multiple times because of some right-of-way issues that we've had, some changes within the the platform electrical feeds. It also includes that turn-back design. We included this in here in anticipation of that, understanding that this amendment would be done on a work order-based process. So I didn't assume you were going to approve the other, but in order to conserve time, we included it in here knowing that I could write them a work order or not. There was some additional work at the maintenance facility because of contaminated soil. They're helping us with our vehicle storage plan. We are still trying to figure out where we're going to store those cars when we receive them, and some other management services. But over half of this amendment was for an autonomous vehicle study. It was a study to determine, can the vehicles be operated autonomously? We would be at the forefront, very cutting edge of that, and that is something that we were interested in. It was quite a discussion at the subcommittee yesterday, and ultimately they pulled that out of this amendment. So you can either vote for the original or move the original amendment or the revised one that you have in front of you.
So at least half of our meeting yesterday was on that topic. So there was an interest. Well, Jacobs was asked about doing a feasibility study on autonomous vehicles, and while it certainly is a very interesting concept, and it may actually prove to be something that saves money and may be worth doing, we didn't believe that it was that we had enough information to be able to recommend that, and we also and certainly we didn't view it as a high enough priority to move that along, and so we amended, as David mentioned, we amended that resolution, subtracting out the cost of that study. And it just so happened that in the same meeting yesterday, we discussed the merits of potentially studying an extension northwest, so going through the Plaza District and OCU. And as a brief history lesson, in the last 5-6 years of the streetcar committees, we have commissioned a study on the Health Science Center, extending the Health Science Center. We looked at the costs or the merits of how to extend South Road to Capitol Hill, which street would be best to use. We even commissioned a study to look at a line to the Adventure District. And so there is a precedent of looking at feasibility and merits of extensions. And our reasoning was that we want to design a system that is set up for long-term success. And so that turnback is a good example. If we knew now that having a turnback at Fifth would open up the possibility of an extension, then we should do that now. So that's kind of our thinking of why would we spend $100,000 to study an extension, and that was why. So there is that precedent, and there was that discussion yesterday of what about a Northwest extension study. And we didn't take action on that, though that wasn't on the agenda. But then in that same conversation, then this feasibility study for autonomous vehicles came up, and our thinking was, well, our priority, if we had our druthers, we'd rather look at an extension first, if anything. But we asked Jacobs to instead come back at a later date. Let's look at both ideas, both potentials for studies. Let's look at a more thorough defense of why we would do either study. And just, and really be deliberate about our prioritization. Because we had that same concern yesterday, is we want to be very mindful about what is the top priority, and is there a need to spend that money. So that's why we pulled out the cost for that study.
I'd just add to that, I think it goes back to what Mr. Dover said earlier, is to reassure you that we are good stewards of the money for the MAPS 3 program. We thought that this was a really cool like to have, nice to have, but we just couldn't see our way to vote for it right this time.
So I do take it then the vehicles we are ordering can be converted to autonomous operation. I'm losing my voice, I'm so sorry. The vehicles we've ordered can be converted to autonomous operation?
That was part of the study, is to determine is it possible and how that retrofit might happen.
And to add to that, we would have been the first in the country, in probably, I don't know if there are some other countries that might be looking at it too, but we would have been the first in the United States to step off in this direction. And, there's a lot of studies going on autonomous cars and tractor-trailer rigs and stuff like this, so it's conceivable. But we didn't want to lead the fleet, so to speak, and we thought we had a better priority for it. So if there's no further discussion, is there a motion?
I'll move to approve the amended resolution, the handout that we have. Move number 2 to contract for engineering consulting services with Jacobs Engineering Group, project 23S7, Mass Street Transit Water Streetcar, fee increase of $207,700.
Do I have a motion and a second? Any further discussion? If not, then we'll go to the vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Motion passes. That brings us to new business. David?
We don't have anything.
Okay, if there's no new business, MAPS 3 Citizen Advisory Board Subcommittee reports.
I'll start out.
Do you have?
Yes.
Yep.
The River Subcommittee met Tuesday. We did not have a quorum. In line with the discussions we had earlier about future asked needs, we have started to develop a list of projects or additions that we think we would like to see done at the River project. We haven't finalized the list yet, but we were presented with a list that had about $7.5 to $8 million worth of projects on them. And the largest one being the finish out of the second floor of the building out there. But there was also signage, and there was some other amenities that would improve attendance and things like that. One of the items we talked about quite a bit was there was some pump revisions that for $125,000 would save $100,000 a year in electricity. So we're going to try to go ahead and at least get that one done because we have just a tiny bit of contingency left. But I just wanted to kind of throw a number out on the table, as we get into this process later this year or next year, and everybody starts accumulating their asks, and we start sorting through those. We'll fine-tune that. Mike Mize has indicated the estimates of the projects are probably pretty conservative, and they added a contingency kind of on top of that, too. So it's probably an opportunity to go down in number rather than up. But I wanted to get a number thrown on the table, I think, at this point in time, with some of the other numbers that have been tossed out for possible needs, the parking garage and the Fifth Wellness Center, and things like that. We wanted to kind of throw our hat in the ring. So, I don't know. Do you have any other comments?
Okay. Bob?
Just a quick update on the fairgrounds. Of course, we had a couple of items on the agenda, especially with regard to wayfinding, signage there. We've had two major events, fairgrounds, the auto show this weekend. Tim O'Toole, the president of the fairgrounds, reports that the Bennett Event Center has been very well received. They're continuing to learn from experience with each event that comes in as the little things that need to be done. There's still some punch list items in terms of construction that are being attended to as they have the experience. But the feedback from promoters, from exhibitors has just been overwhelmingly positive. And remarkably, the Bennett Center has been filled for these events, but the promoters have filled the other building, the fairgrounds, as well. And so tens of thousands of people are attending events. It's already proven very good success.
Good. Great. Sue?
Trails and sidewalks, of course. Lots of sidewalks being built, and we received a report that showed us we had a study done and had identified routes. And so it was nice to see what we've accomplished. So that was a little fulfilling, and yet, we're not halfway through that list with the money that we have. So lots of identified places. And then you probably see evidence of the Will Rogers Trail Northwest Expressway coming down through Hefner Parkway all the way to the river. So that urban trail is, ground's broken, we're putting blacktop on. You're going to see a lot of construction through that. So.
Okay, Michael, do you have anything you want to, Cecilia, anything? Kim? Okay. Okay, and with that, we'll go on to the next informational items. David?
You should have in your packet the latest site acquisition status map for the convention center. There's really only 2 properties that we are still working to acquire. And then you can see B through H, the various activities that have gone with the land acquisition. I'd like to point out on item D, there's a typographical error, and it's actually the west side of Robinson, not 1300, but it's the west side of Robinson between 12th and 13th Street. That's all I have.
That brings us to update status of the MAP3 program. David?
Real briefly, I'll hit on a few other things. The pedestrian bridge is under construction at the Riversport Rapids, and I understand that that is to reopen this season on March 11th on a weekends basis, and then later in the year it will go to full-time opening. Senior Wellness, don't forget that we have a ribbon cutting for Wellness Center 1. Very happy to be having that February 28th at 2 p.m. at the facility, which is at 118th and North Rockwell. Wellness Center 2 is under construction. Then park design continues on the upper park. Hope to have final plans to you next month. Utility relocations are complete, and we're still doing preliminary design on the lower park, and as you see from the informational items, still some land acquisition there. And then we talked a lot about streetcar today, but the track is here. They've done the welding of a lot of that rail already. Streetcars are under construction in Brookville, Pennsylvania. The main line has begun. If you go down to Joe Carter between Reno and Sheridan, you'll see the excavation that has occurred, and probably next week you'll start seeing all the steel that's being tied and the base courses of that being placed. And then if you go by the maintenance facility, I was really pleased yesterday they started getting the storage bays up. So there's a whole lot of steel up in the air on the maintenance facility, and that'll be taking shape real quick this summer.
I'd just like to add to that, thanks for all the great work that you and your staff did with the groundbreaking for the streetcar. It was a very well received and very well attended event. Okay. With that, it brings us to, do we have any comments by the board members? Any comments by staff?
No, sir.
Any comments by any citizens who would like to come forward? Okay. If not, that brings us to the end of the meeting. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Second? Okay, all in favor? We are adjourned.